Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll make a speed run through all the key business stories you need to know about from Nairobi, Lagos, Cairo and Johannesburg. It's going to be an interesting ride. Here's what's coming up. Egypt opens up conversations with the International Monetary Fund once again. Business competitiveness takes center stage at the World Export Development Forum in Kigali. And we'll be featuring a young entrepreneur who's winning accolades for her recycling solutions in Ghana. Let's start in Egypt. The country's tourism industry, which was of course greatly affected by the unrest and economic turmoil in that country over the last 3 years, could fully recover by the end of 2015. But that would only happen if the regional turmoil we're seeing now doesn't spread into Egypt. The country's tourism minister Hisham Zazu said tourist numbers could rise by up to 10% this year, essentially recovering to pre-unrest levels of 14.7 million visitors by 2015. Sea resorts and ancient sites are the backbone of the Egyptian tourism industry, and they've mostly escaped attacks by militants. Zazu, however, said he would also be promoting other alternative options like desert safaris, desert trekking and spa tourism as well. Tourist traffic has slowly started to recover, but a deterioration of the security situation in the wider Middle East, think of Syria, think of Iraq, those all could pose a further threat to the sector as a whole.
As soon as you have a disruption in this kind of stable environment, relative stable environment that we're enjoying at the moment, for sure this will affect tourism negatively. But I believe the government is extremely aware of that, and we're looking forward ahead to confront this kind of challenge and threat.
Still in Egypt, the government there will invite the International Monetary Fund to assess its economic reforms before an economic summit in February next year. Now, this, of course, is a fairly annual thing. The technical term for it is Article 4 consultations, and the fund will be evaluating the economic situation in the country and its ability to service its public debts. Finance Minister Hani Kadri Demian says the results of the IMF mission will be published before the summit is held in the hope of attracting foreign investments. Egypt's economy dipped, of course, following 3 years of political unrest. A good report card from the IMF is essential. This will not only benefit the economy from a perception standpoint, but it might lift lucrative sectors like the stock market and tourism. Egypt's recent economic reforms have focused on cutting fuel subsidies with the aim of trimming the country's budget deficit. Despite previous aid packages from Gulf countries in 2013, the country still needs financial assistance from the IMF or Arab countries to achieve proper prosperity and get its finances back on track moving forward. Libya's elected parliament on Sunday dismissed the governor of the country's central bank. The governor, Sadek Omar El Kaber, had failed to attend a session of the House of Representatives to discuss alleged financial irregularities at the Treasury. Now, it was not immediately clear how the House of Representatives would then implement its decision. The newly elected parliament moved to Tobruk in the far east of the country since an armed opposition group seized the capital, Tripoli, last month, and it reappointed the previous House members. The central bank has tried to stay out of the political struggle in Libya, but it's been facing demands from both parliaments to approve budget payments. The bank is responsible for booking the country's oil revenues in its accounts. That, of course, is Libya's only source of income for its budget. The dismissal of El Kaber has left the deputy governor, Ali Al-Hibri, in charge of the central bank until a successor has been appointed. Qatar National Bank, or QNB, has acquired a further 11% stake in the Pan-African lender Ecobank Transnational in a deal worth $283 million. The Qatari lender acquired over 2 billion ordinary shares using its resources. QNB now has a total holding of 23.5% in Ecobank. The latest purchase comes after it acquired a 12.5% stake in Ecobank from the Nigerian Bad Bank Asset Management Company of Nigeria earlier this month. Now then, uplifting the welfare of women, especially female entrepreneurs, and facilitating their ability to do business easily is absolutely key to improving exports in Africa. The World Exports Development Forum that kicked off in Kigali, Rwanda, has challenged African governments and the amount of room that remains to be covered to improve the lot of female entrepreneurs as far as land rights, access to credit and training is concerned. The forum runs over the next 3 days. It's being held for the first time ever in Africa.
We know many countries, including Rwanda, who have put in place policy and legal frameworks for gender equality, for women empowerment, which is fantastic, even in other countries. We know that we have programs and projects in place. We can talk about affirmative action in place to make sure that we have women in decision-making position. We can talk about what kind of programs have been put in place in order to empower these women. But women were telling us that, yes, this is good, but it is not enough.
We looked at the challenges that women entrepreneurs have to join international and regional markets. We have explored difficulties in market intelligence, in capacity building to improve the competitiveness of women-owned SMEs, in access to finance, and in connecting women to markets.
And we look at the SMEs, especially on gender-based inclination. We look at SMEs, those who have products, we test them and we certify them. That is one way. But now the contention is, what about the rural woman? The rural woman who wants to join the competitive market. That is where the challenge is.
Quick run through equity markets here for you before we run on to the second part of the bulletin. Here are the numbers as we see them on this end of the planet. With respect to South Africa, some interesting developments. AngloGold Ashanti, of course, did make quite the U-turn after shareholders essentially revolted at its $2.1 billion proposed rights issue. The effect of that decision, however, means that now it has to sell off some assets if it is to pay down the debt, all the debt that it has, roughly $3 billion or so worth in total. We'll be looking at that in a little more detail in the course of the week right here on CCTV Africa. Speaking of South Africa, its tourism minister seeks to talk to players in the industry about new rules that threaten to cripple the sector. And we'll also be looking at the efforts in Cote d'Ivoire to bring down the cost of broadband. All that and more is coming up next. Africa is on the move. It's home to 7 of the world's 10 fastest growing economies. We help you make sense of the fast-changing African business landscape. We take you where the business is happening.
African leaders have been urged to make it easier to move and do business across borders within the African continent.
Africans should be free to move in their continent, to do business, to interact, if we are to grow the levels of investment and trade that will ensure that we are able to create the jobs for our people that we require.
Welcome back. You're still watching Global Business Africa from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Now, in South Africa, the looming introduction of stricter visa regulations and controls has seen travel and tourism sector players trying to engage with the Minister of Home Affairs to explain the potential unintended consequences of these new regulations. As Angelo Coppola reports, there may be a softening of the visa requirements to come.
When Minister Gigaba took up his new portfolio, he probably didn't realize what a hornet's nest he was stepping into when he announced the new visa regulations. They were aimed at combating child trafficking and properly documenting tourists while travelers were still in their home countries. The minister met with airline representatives and tourism industry bodies on Friday morning to hear their concerns, and in a surprise move said it was time to work together.
We support the establishment of the joint task team between the department and the industry to look at ironing out implementation issues relating to the regulations that we announced in May.
The task team will be headed by a senior Home Affairs Ministry official. Gigaba also alluded to a briefing session next week where he would make other announcements on the road ahead. Role players have expectations that portions of the new regulations will be reconsidered.
What are we looking forward to next week? Minister being able to say he's postponing, maybe not all of them, maybe he says he's postponing the implementation of one of them, and most importantly, to be able to communicate, work together to communicate this so that our clients and the South Africans for that are not confused.
That would be the best way to approach it, in my view. That would give the industry time to engage and discuss the issue more thoroughly, and then also come up with communication policy.
While high hopes have been placed on the task team, Gigaba was very clear there would be no movement on the anti-child trafficking regulations and visa restrictions that come into play on the 1st of October. What impact the other visa regulations are going to have on tourists coming into the country remains to be seen. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Pretoria.
And Angelo Coppola joins us now live from Johannesburg, South Africa, with more details on that particular story. Angelo, exactly how much time does the workforce have to do its work, and what specific parts of the new regulations will it be focusing on?
Well, this task team, according to the briefing session we went through, is going to be open-ended, and all the parties insisted all it's really about is communication, or the lack thereof. So what we're going to see is they're going to keep on talking, but it's all about the data as well. Home Affairs have based a lot of their regulations on their research and their data. The Tourism Business Council have done their own research and have their own findings. And IATA bring international best practice case studies into this task team. So at the moment there are three key issues. It's the unabridged birth certificates for children and minors who are traveling either with their parents or without their parents. Then there's the question of in-person visa applications, where they're insisting that people are in-person present when they're applying for visas to come into South Africa. And finally, biometrics and the need for biometric registration of people looking to get visas. But a source close to the discussions has informed me just a little while ago that tomorrow the minister is going to announce the postponement of the unabridged birth certificate implementation dates. We don't know when they're going to be, but that is the talk at the moment. Raman?
Indeed. Speaking of hard data, as you mentioned, what information do we have, rather, of the effect that these new regulations had on incoming tourist traffic ever since the announcement in May?
Well, I had the opportunity to talk to the Comair CEO recently, and he said to me that as soon as that announcement was made, there was an immediate increase in inquiries. But because of the lack of clarity and certainty from potential visitors, many tourists simply said that they're not going to book to visit the country until they have more clarity. However, of course, we've got to weigh this up against the continued rand weakness and tourists looking for good bargains. So you'll probably find that they'll do their paperwork and they'll come and take advantage of the South African rand weakness. But Tourism Business Council South Africa suggested that the tourism sector in terms of employment was going to be suffering because those tourists would be going elsewhere. IATA said that they're concerned because reservation numbers will probably come down until there's more clarity. Of course, there are no hard facts available just yet. Stats South Africa will only probably release some data towards the end of the quarter. Raman?
Indeed. Angela, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the airlines and the tourism sector players here. Both, as you mentioned, have expressed their reservations about these regulations. But if they were the ones in charge of crafting the immigration rules, what would they like to see in place?
Well, that's the strange thing. To a T, every single one of those people we spoke to have all said the only real issue here is a lack of a communication strategy or policy so that these new regulations could be communicated properly. Something that Gigaba's predecessor probably didn't do was involve the industry in the process, and it seems like all they wanted was to be spoken to and to share information with. They understand the need for child trafficking laws. They understand the need for those visa regulations that are going to be implemented. So it appears that they really wanted to be part of the conversation. And now it seems that they're getting their wish. They have the data. They're hoping to influence in some manner, but they don't want to change anything as far as we could tell. They are looking for a phased-in approach, though, and proper communication that is with industry themselves and with the travelers out there. Rahman?
Indeed, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for that. That's CCTV's Angela Coppola in Johannesburg. To give you an idea of just what is at stake here, South Africa last year got about 9.6 million tourists going into that country. Fairly big numbers all around. Let's take it to the other side of the continent. Cote d'Ivoire over in West Africa. It's enjoyed strong economic growth over the last couple of years, 9.8% in 2012, slowed down a bit in 2013 to 8%, and this year it's expected to grow by 8.2%. The same, however, can't be said of its ICT sector. It remains hugely underdeveloped with few available services which are overpriced, and that's mainly due to an existing monopoly that controls the terrestrial network and the only undersea cable that links Cote d'Ivoire to the rest of the world. Now, targeted consumers, of course, have little knowledge of the potential of the internet as well. The government, however, is trying to change that. It's just hosted an international web fair that aims to raise awareness about the benefits of internet connectivity at a lower price and encouraging more investment in the sector.
The aim of the web fair is to promote the professional use of the internet. We also want to talk about cybercrime. It is obvious that today all the enterprises use digital communication to spread their image worldwide. So we found it very important to organize such a platform to gather all the suppliers of the internet to exchange and draw together new challenges in Cote d'Ivoire.
Internet in Cote d'Ivoire has improved in the fight against cybercrime. Many international organizations who put our country on the blacklist because of cybercrime have changed their view. They now trust more Cote d'Ivoire because of the work we did in the cybercrime level.
Internet in Cote d'Ivoire has improved in the fight against cybercrime. Many international organizations put our country on a blacklist because cybercrime changed their view. They now trust Cote d'Ivoire more because of the work that we did at the cybercrime level.
Let's take it to Ethiopia. The country has saved an estimated $38.9 million in the last 6 years. How? Well, simply supplied ethanol blended with benzene. The country's blended up to 50.3 million litres of each over that period. Here's Girum Chala with more.
Ethiopia spends the much-needed foreign currency in buying fuel from abroad. Now, thanks to blending of ethanol with benzene, close to $40 million was saved over the last 6 years.
We proved that the possibility of ethanol blending in Ethiopia is very profitable and it will assist our economy. We discussed with fuel stations to construct the blending facilities.
We are substituting the foreign currency. The money that would have been spent in importing gasoline has been reduced by 10%.
The country produces 100 million litres of ethanol in its two biggest sugar factories. This is used as the 10% blender of benzene, which is now being used in the country. Motorists say they are happy with the blended fuel.
I have used the blended fuel for the last 4 years. The mixture of benzene and ethanol is good so far for my car. In return, it's also saving our hard-earned currency.
As a driver, I found it harmless using mixed fuel. It's better than before.
Just we insert like this, and it will show you.
Across the country, there are 3 blending facilities responsible in delivering fuel to the market by first taking the necessary quality assurance work.
Scientifically, it has been proved up to 10% of ethanol in gasoline it will not have any detrimental effect on vehicles. So it has been approved by the car manufacturers, and that is it.
Convincing customers wasn't, of course, a cakewalk at the beginning, as drivers complained of the poor quality of the fuel they were buying. Encouraged by the results, however, Ethiopia now wants to increase the current 10% ethanol blending to 25%.
Even if you increase the ethanol blending from E10 to E25, you have to have the stock, ethanol stock. For that, of course, as you know, there are a lot of sugar factories under construction currently, like Tandaho, Kurraz, Walqait, Balas. Those all factories will increase the production of ethanol to our blending facilities.
This is part of Ethiopia's green growth strategy, aiming at environmentally friendly growth. It looks like the strategy is working with the current success in the area. Ethiopia is the pioneer African nation to blend ethanol with benzene. This had a lot of economic significance over the last many years. Experts suggest the rest of the continent should try to implement the same thing for its economic and environmental benefits. Grumjala, CCTV, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Perhaps fittingly, let's talk about oil. Brent crude futures down about $97 a barrel. That's the lowest it's been in about 2 years, give or take. Why exactly? Well, it has something to do with Chinese data. Factory output was essentially at its lowest, grew rather at its lowest pace in about 6 years or so. A combination of factors then also come into play as well. You've got dampened demand on one hand, oversupply on the other, and remember the American dollar is also strengthening as well. We certainly do live in interesting times as far as crude oil prices are concerned. When we come back, we'll be looking at a young entrepreneur who's been recognized for her recycling solutions in Ghana. We have to pay a couple of bills. We'll be back in about 60 seconds.
BizAsia. Asia means business.
Welcome back at 18:23 GMT. You're still watching Global Business Africa. Now, the top 12 finalists have been announced for the 2014 Anzusha Prize. The competition recognizes and celebrates African entrepreneurs between the ages of 15 and 22 who are using businesses to solve problems in their communities. Nigerian-born Chineye Okoro Onu made the shortlist. She leads a recycling program with a difference in Ghana, as Katerina Vitozzi found out.
The familiar face and words of Martin Luther King captured in a work of art. But this may be one of the first times he's been immortalised using old plastic bags and waste paper.
This particular part of this portrait is made with the sachet rubber bags, okay? We actually have a sculpture of Martin Luther King there on it. And the frame, which is the part I love most about this art piece, it's made with mashed papers, waste paper.
Nigerian student Chineye Okoro Onu heads up the Mosaic Project in Ghana, where she attends university. The project's raw materials: discarded plastic water sachets. Through a combination of folding and stapling, they are turned into pieces for mosaics. Onu and her team believe it's a creative way to deal with one of Ghana's big problems: rubbish.
Most people, we realize that what they do at homes and people around, when they gather the plastic waste, they burn them, and that doesn't actually help the landfill, because once it doesn't, it's very difficult for it to decompose. So we decided to come up with this idea where we don't have to burn it, we don't have to make it decompose into the earth. So what we do is we turn it into beautiful works of art.
And they've been able to turn that trash into cash. The artworks can be sold or commissioned. The sustainability of the business model caught the eye of the Anzisha Prize. It's an award for young African social entrepreneurs, and Mosaic-Spiration's been shortlisted. The Anzisha Prize recognises the work of young African entrepreneurs. Yes, it's a competition and one with a hefty cash prize for the winner, but its overall aim is to encourage more young African entrepreneurs to find sustainable business models to address social problems in their communities. And the energy here is infectious. More than 50 of Chineye's fellow students have taken part in the project. They want to make a change.
It's a breathtaking idea, and then taking this up from the street and then avoiding the burning of this, which will also cause, we all know about the greenhouse effect going on right now, and we believe if we could make it big enough, we could actually impact a difference.
So picking up this sachet rubbers would really help. Making them useful will really help to avoid this kind of diseases in our environment, making them into beautiful artworks. So I think it's very good, and I think with this project we can win an Anzisha Prize.
The overall winners will be announced in South Africa in a few weeks' time. They'll share prize money of $75,000 US. A win, therefore, could help ensure this project's future. Katerina Vitozzi, CCTV, Accra.
Quick run through the currencies here for you. One key event to definitely put on your calendar later on with respect to the South African Rand. The rate-setting body for the South African Reserve Bank, its Monetary Policy Committee, meets on Thursday. The question is whether or not they will actually add on to the rate hikes that we've seen over the last couple of months. But remember, the Fed also releases its rate guidance a day earlier, on Wednesday. So Wednesday and Thursday going to be an interesting set of 48 hours. We'll certainly have the latest details right here on CCTV. Now, just before we go, here's what you can expect to see on this program tomorrow. The World Export Development Forum continues in Kigali, Rwanda. We'll have details and content from that end of the world. We'll also be talking to a taxi operator in Cairo who's discovered a silver lining to the city's enormous traffic jams. And by the way, in case you're wondering why we're not live in those two locations today, it has to do with one simple thing: power, or lack thereof, in both Cairo and Kigali. It happens. This is the cost of live broadcast, ladies and gentlemen. But that's it for this edition of Global Business. Send your feedback to globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com. Wherever you are online, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, we're there. We've got you covered. Thank you for watching. I'm Raman Yang. We'll see you in the next 23 hours.